Gemini and Cancer path.
Mm-hmm. So you're working with Enochian is very kind of different than goetic workings, where generally the goetic enterprise is to actually kind of get something from the goetic entity.
Well, in the lesser, if you're actually working straight, and when I pass the lesser quadrants, I try to ask them to do stuff too, or I try to talk to them too. I don't ignore the subquadrant angles just because I have to pass them in order to get to the governor.
Mm-hmm.
So we do try to spend some time with them, and we do try to get sort of some stuff out of them. The kings actually in the watchtowers actually will do stuff for you. What's it called? Keith's favorite thing, discernment and judgment and judgment in human affairs. There's two different things. One's positive and one's negative. At the top of my head, I can't remember what it is. But so you can get them to sort of resolve sort of human social kinds of issues, political issues you might have, etc. And they will resolve them, but they have sort of larger agendas going on. The lesser angles, I do sometimes ask them to solve sort of trivial problems. Depends on where they are. If you look at Jeffrey James, you'll see that there's a sort of user's guide to the subquadrants. Some of them give you metals, money, transmutation, transportation.
Do they ever ask for anything in return?
No, they don't usually ask for things in return.
So it's a very different kind of
It's not a quid pro quo kind of arrangement, no. Yes, and goetic, particularly the ones in not the Theurgia, but the regular Goetia that people usually work. Yeah, they're very quid pro quo.
Yeah.
About it, and yes, they're arranging sort of a capitalist arrangement you have with them, and they want something, and they give you something in return for it. Not all aspects of the Goetia are like that, but even the Theurgia Goetia, they want a certain kind of, they like incense, and there's certain kinds of things they like in order to sort of the medium in which they want to work, and they want certain kinds of results from that too. It varies.
All right. Well, so then you go through and you ask them the questions, and then once you've determined that you're done, how do you go through a closing and banishing? And so
you banish all the damn things you had to invoke in the first place. And but you can do. I usually banish a lot faster than I invoke. So banish through everything, and then I don't use the keys again. I only use the keys to get in, and I banish back out. And once I'm done with all the watchtower machinery I have to banish, then I banish the hexagram and banish the pentagram and purify and consecrate again. I purify and consecrate before I start anything. Purify and consecrate again and go take a bath.
And so this whole enterprise sounds like it takes quite a few hours.
It can be long, yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think how long it took us. The other day we started about 11:30. We were done, I think, about 2:45. So
about 3 hours there.
3 hours. Yeah.
And how much?
The mechanics of when people are first conjuring, particularly in any given system, it takes longer because you're systematically trying to figure out what you're doing as you're going along, even if you have it written down. But after a while, it becomes sort of second nature.
And so you actually can go quickly one to the other.
Yeah, I think it probably took us 40 minutes to get in last time. I'd have to look. About 20 minutes to get out. So of all that time, about an hour of it was taken in conjuring. Now,
when you say you'd have to go look, so you're obviously taking notes during this whole process?
Somebody is. Well, hopefully you got somebody who's keeping track of what's going on, yeah.
So you generally work with 3 people?
We've been working with 3 to 4 people, yeah.
Okay. And so somebody's
tried taping it, and actually they're getting pretty good at taping. I have to admit, I used to be a complete. I was not averse to taping, but I had a lot of failures with taping, and it didn't seem to work very well. I don't tape, but they do, and so. And
then they transcribe later?
Then they transcribe, yeah.
And are they using conventional like taping, or are they now working with like MP3 players?
No, they're one of those like little hand with the tiny cassette players.
Okay, and that seems to work.
It seems to work every once I hear the clicking in the background when they're switching out the tapes. So yeah.
All right.
It seems to work, but the person who's taking the way we have it worked out. The person who's taking care of the tape is also trying to write stuff down, and all they're really doing is monitoring the tape. Mm-hmm. And they take notes as we go along. And sometimes it comes in phases in and out. You don't want the recording device to be particularly intrusive.
Right. Okay. Well, if somebody wanted to really start getting into this, you mentioned A True and Faithful Relation. What other books would you recommend that they start reading?
Well, they should start with. Enochian is one of those things, and unfortunately, you need to, at some point along the way, read pretty much everything that's out there. Although, unfortunately, now when I started doing it, everything that was out there wasn't very much. Now everything that's out there is an awful lot, particularly if you count the crap that's on the internet, and most of which it is. It's mostly just horrific and awful in every possible way. And I try to talk to these people and figure out why they do what they do and what they get out of what they get, and they don't seem to make a lot of sense to me. But hey, if it gets them off, that's fine. I think Jeffrey James. I don't know. Is Jeffrey James back in print? I think it is. I think you can get it from Llewellyn. There's a really nice little book called Elizabethan Magic by a man named Robert Turner, which covers a lot of the same material. Those are both good places to begin. Peterson's John Dee's 5 Books of Mystery is something you probably should plow through. If you get that and A True and Faithful, you have all the essential visions, pretty much. Anything you're going to need for the next, 4 or 5 years anyway. There's more detailed stuff you'll need at some point. People should read the Monads, should read the Hieroglyphic Monad to understand what Dee's underlying logic is. And I think a good biography of Dee is worthwhile. Charlotte Fell Smith's out there. John French, I think his name is, has another one. And I think there's the Calder thesis is out there. Cluley's book on Dee is useful as places to start, sort of in the middle. I like Tyson, although I don't agree with everything he says. Tyson asks the tough questions. I don't like the way he resolves everything, but at least he's attempting to resolve it. His book on Enochian is good. His book called Tetragrammaton is okay. And his Agrippa is invaluable. It's probably the best edition of the 3 books of Agrippa that's ever been done. You need Agrippa because Agrippa is the foundation from which Dee is working. All the basic principles underlying Western ceremonial magic are set forth in books 2 and 3 of Agrippa. So I think they're invaluable. I mean, even things like 777, which Thelemic magicians take sort of for granted, are based on the scales that are set down in Agrippa's 3 books called Philosophy.
Now, you mentioned earlier Dee wrote an introduction about Euclidean geometry.
He did. He wrote an introduction to Euclid, and I'm a big fan of Euclid, too. I don't know, good magic and geometry are closely interrelated, and I don't think it's a whole lot to ask people to get a decent copy of, Dover edition of Euclid and get a straight edge and a compass and try to resolve how to construct those figures, because a lot of what happens in Enochian magic is based on geometric principles. Without that geometry, you're kind of lost. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the introduction to Euclid, I don't know. I have a copy that I don't know if you can get that still. You can get it from a library, I'm sure. It's been reprinted sometime in the late 80s. It was reprinted, and it's pretty easy to come by as far as interlibrary loaning goes. It's not very long. It's about 20 pages long. It's an interesting document. And a lot of the principles underlying Enochian are made clearer if you read that introduction to Euclid. But I don't think it's not the most critical thing that somebody has to start with. He wrote another book called the Propaedumata Aphoristica, which is commonly published as Dee on Astronomy. And I know it's not in print, but it's, again, pretty easy to come by in university libraries. And it's really useful when you get to the sigil, because it really does explain a lot of the astrological and astronomical principles upon which the system of the sigil works. But that's a different system. It's not watchtowers. If you're just doing watchtowers to begin with, get a Euclid.
Okay.
The Dover beginning, also, there's a lot of really interesting information, particularly in the first volume of the Dover, 3 volumes of Euclid. There's a lot of really interesting information about Dee, because Dee's introduction to Euclid was the standard introduction to Euclid up through the middle of the 18th century for a good 300 years. The Billingsley's edition, and so you can find those around. I've known people who had them, and so that's useful from that point of view, if nothing else. And explains a lot of what we have of Euclid survived because Dee kept it. So he was actually physically involved in the survival of the text of Euclid that we have now.
Well, fantastic. It's obviously a lot of work to get involved in this and actually do it right. But
I don't know, doing it right. Do any of us? That's what I ask myself. Do any of us do it right all the time? It's a science, and so you're approaching it from approaching it as an experimental endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I try to do in my writings is I try to maybe transfer it a little bit from being a science to being a technology, to something that people can apply with some consistent results. But I only know that I partially succeed at that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just what it is. We all have to wander out into the unknown a little bit sometimes. One of the advantages to Enochian is that there are still large swaths of it that are, fairly unknown, fairly unworked. So there's a lot of, information that can be gleaned out there if you really work at it. And if there are parts of your own magical practice that you don't understand, one of the ways of approaching it, that's what Enochian's for, is say, okay, I don't understand how the lesser hexagram works, or I don't understand why pentagrams are the way that they are, or some of the angels give you secrets of men. I don't understand this degree I just took in whatever silly occult orders that we belong to. Please explain this to me. And it's amazing how lucid their explanations can be at times, and how useful they can be at providing you with information about things that you didn't understand before.
If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, how should they do so?
I'm in MySpace. People should find me in MySpace. I think MySpace is a great networking resource. I don't blog a lot there. I don't put a lot of stuff up there. But as far as actually just getting in contact with people who are interested and people I know, send me an email through MySpace, which is...
I'll put it in the show notes.
Thank you very much. It's Karantan Club at some level, and I'm listed under my real name, David R. Jones.
Okay. Well, this is it's already been about an hour, so I'm sure we could keep going on this, but...
No, that's okay. We're okay. Time flies when you're having fun.
Sounds great. So I really appreciate you being on the show and talking a lot about this.
An honor, in fact. To be in the rogues gallery of your show.
Well, there's been a large variety of people on it, so
I hear. I have many friends. I'm not a big fan of podcasts, and I can't honestly say I've listened to any of them ever. And but my friends all think your podcast is the best.
Well, thank you.
Including my local friends in this environment. They're like, "Wow, it's a great podcast." So you have great reviews from the larger Thelema community.
Well, that is very flattering, and thank you for saying so.
The only people who don't like your podcast are the people who never listen to it.
No, that's not true.
Well, at least the people I've talked to who say they don't like your podcast, I've asked them, and none of them have listened to it.
No, well, that's true, and usually they do that because they don't like my politics or something, which is, I guess, judging a book by its cover, but... What can you do?
As Thelemites, there's an exercise in Liber 3 about politics, and this exercise applies to politics both on the national, local, and whatever social organizations you belong to. But the idea is, you get a ring and you put it on one finger, and you adopt the point of view that you would normally have, maybe, or some arbitrary point of view, and you move it over to the other hand, and you adopt some other political point of view. And after a while, you realize that those political points of view are somewhat arbitrary. And even if you don't agree with somebody else's politics, you need to respect them sometimes. And dissent is a great thing. It's a blessing and virtue of the Enlightenment that we're supposed to have learned from our forefathers. And our Masonic forebearers or whoever, came up with the Constitution of the United States, the Illuminati or whoever people want to blame for that.